Welcome back. Today's explainer is a real game changer because we're building something super practical. Got a JavaScript coding exam coming up? Or maybe you just need a cure for that 2 a.m. pre-exam panic where all the jargon just kind of blurs together? Well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to build a visual mental cheat sheet for you today. We'll lock in the core differences between properties and methods in JavaScript, stripping away all that extra noise and focusing strictly on what you actually need to know to ace this test and write better code.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our game plan for today. The object container, the car analogy, properties versus methods, cracking the code's syntax, built-in objects, and finally, the exam study guide.
All right, part 1, the object container. So before we can even think about passing an exam on properties and methods, we've got to start with a high-level understanding of what an object actually is in programming. It sounds super abstract, I know, but JavaScript actually uses a wonderfully stripped-down, simplified version of objects compared to a lot of other languages. Do yourself a favor and commit this exact quote to memory. Essentially, an object is just a container which encloses data and behavior together. Seriously, if you get a definitional question on your exam, that is your gold standard answer. An object isn't just a single value, right? It's a wrapper. Think of it like a box where we group together pieces of data and the specific behaviors that logically belong with that data. They just live happily together inside this single container.
Moving on to part 2, the car analogy.
To really map those abstract programming terms into something your brain can just instantly recall during a stressful exam, let's translate this into a physical, real-world concept. Think of a real-world car. A car perfectly splits into two totally distinct buckets. On one hand, it has specific characteristics or, bits of information that describe it, like its color or its absolute maximum speed. On the other hand, it has actions it can perform, like driving, braking, or accelerating, well, assuming you're not stuck in rush hour traffic anyway. But you see, it's a single object, the car, but it holds both static data and dynamic actions.
Which brings us to part 3, properties versus methods. Now that we've got that car analogy locked in our heads, we're going to translate those buckets directly into the core programming concepts you actually need for your exam. So the crucial point here is this definition. In programming terms, those behaviors, the driving, the braking, they're called methods. And what is a method, really? Well, it's simply a function that belongs to a specific object. If a function is just out there floating around on its own, it's just a function. But the very second it belongs to our car object, we give it a special name. We call it a method.
Looking at this head-to-head comparison, we can see the absolute foundational logic of object-oriented programming in JavaScript. Properties? They represent your data and information. Think of them as the nouns and adjectives. Methods, on the other hand, represent your behaviors and functions. They are the verbs. So, extracting a static bit of data is accessing a property, while triggering an action is invoking a method.
Let's hit part 4, cracking the code syntax.
Understanding the concepts is step 1, sure, but your exam is going to test you on the actual code. So let's shift focus to the JavaScript syntax rules. These are essentially the ultimate cheat code for telling properties and methods apart just by looking at them. Now, what's really interesting here is the punctuation, or actually the complete lack of it at the end. Here we have mycar.maxspeed. We use what's called dot notation, which is literally just a period after the variable name to access features of the object. But notice something, there are absolutely no parentheses at the end of max speed. That is deliberate. Because we're just extracting static property data, a little bit of info about the car's speed, we don't need to call a function. No action is being run, therefore no parentheses.
Now contrast that immediately with invoking an action. mycar.drive, followed by parentheses. Look right at the end of that statement. We have parentheses. When you're sitting in your exam and you see those parentheses, alarm bells should literally be ringing in your head. This is a method. We are actively telling the car to perform its drive behavior. Because a method is a function, we absolutely must use parentheses to actually invoke or trigger that action.
And just real quick, what if you need to give that action some specific instructions? Say you want the car to drive at exactly 35 miles per hour. Well, you just pass those arguments right inside those parentheses. The structure is exactly the same. It's an action, it's a method, it has parentheses, and the data it needs to actually perform the action just sits neatly right inside them.
All right, part 5, built-in objects.
At this point, you might be sitting there thinking, I haven't actually built a car object in my code yet. But here is the secret. You are already applying these exact object rules in your JavaScript code every single day without even realizing it. In JavaScript's system, almost everything you interact with acts as an object container. Strings, numbers, arrays, these aren't just isolated, boring values. They're built-in objects. They come completely prepackaged with their very own sets of properties and methods that logically belong to them. Let's look at exactly how this connects to your everyday coding.
Take the longhand way to create a string, for instance, var myString equals newString. This explicitly creates a brand new instance of a string object. But look at the shorthand version you probably use all the time, var myString equals hello. Even though it looks like just a simple text assignment, under the hood, JavaScript is still creating a new string object for you behind the scenes. Both versions give you an object container that's completely ready to be used.
And this brilliantly illustrates our syntax rules returning on those exact strings. When we check myString.length, we just want to know how many characters are in the string, right? That's static data. It's a property. So what does that mean? No parentheses. But when we use myString.toLowercase, we are actively asking JavaScript to take that text and convert it to lowercase letters. That is an action. It's a behavior. It's a method. So we absolutely must include the parentheses to invoke it. The rules never change, whether it's a theoretical car or a real string sitting right there in your code.
Finally, Part 6, the Exam Study Guide.
We've covered the theory, the analogy, and the syntax. Get ready to mentally screenshot this final wrap-up matrix. Let's walk through it row by row to permanently lock this into your brain. First row, a property. Its definition is that it extracts static data or information. In our car analogy, this is the color or the max speed. And the crucial syntax question, does it require parentheses? No way. Second row, a method. Its definition is that it invokes a behavior or a function attached to the object. Back to our car, this is driving or braking. Does it require parentheses in the syntax? Yes, absolutely. If you can just recreate this simple matrix in your head, I promise you will absolutely crush the objects section of your exam.
So we've mastered the rules and we know exactly how to use built-in objects like strings and arrays. But that leaves us with one massive, really exciting question. You know the built-in objects, but how do you actually construct your own custom car object entirely from scratch in JavaScript? How do you model literally anything you want in your code? Keep this matrix fresh in your mind because creating your own custom objects is the very next step in your programming journey. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Study hard, and I'll catch you next time.